Now, if VSAN sounds a lot like VLAN, you're correct. Traditionally, with storage area networks, you started out with one SAN, maybe a production SAN, and then you realized maybe I'd like another SAN for my tape drives, or maybe I want another SAN for my test and dev environment. And basically what happened is we started to get a bunch of SAN islands in our environment. A VSAN is analogous to a VLAN in Ethernet. The VSAN feature was created to be more cost-effective with physical fabrics. We can reduce wasted ports of a SAN island approach, and we can actually logically separate out our storage area networks by creating separate VSANs. This also allows us to isolate and reduce risk in our environment by isolating our different SANs into these different VSANs. So if an event happens in one VSAN, it won't affect another. We also have different fiber channel features that can be configured on a VSAN basis. So if we take those multiple physical SANs and we combine them together into virtual SANs, then we can assign ports to those virtual SANs, and they're logically separate fabrics. Now this separation is hardware enforced, and it prevents any type of fabric disruptions in one VSAN from affecting another. So as you can see in the lower right corner, we go to our VSAN database, which is similar to our VLAN database, and we create the different VSANs, for instance VSAN 2 and VSAN 4, and then we go ahead and assign ports to those VSANs. So each VSAN is configured and managed independently. If we take a look at, once again, what this looks like on the switch, on the far left side I have my host, and I want to attach my host to VSAN 323. My host is plugged into fiber channel port 2/3. So I go into my 9700 switch, I go into my configure terminal, and then I go into my VSAN database. And I first create VSAN 323, and then I assign fiber channel interface 2/3 to VSAN 323. It's also important to note that these changes won't take effect until I exit the VSAN database. Now if I go in and show my Floggy database or my Fabric login database, I can see that port 2/3 is logged in on VSAN 323. I can also link multiple switches together and trunk or ISL those switches together, which is basically trunking your VSANs from one switch to another and creating a single fabric from end to end. There are some rules that I need to be careful of. For instance, a VSAN must be configured on each side. So if I have VSAN 323 on one switch, I need to have VSAN 323 on the other switch before that VSAN is permitted to cross the link. That VSAN must also be allowed on that trunk link or that ISL. And the domain ID or the fabric domain ID for each switch must be unique. And finally, there can't be any zoning conflicts, which we'll learn about later on in this slide. If I take a look at the right, I can see if I do a show interface fiber channel port 1/17, I can see that it is trunking VSANs over that inner switch link. And I can see that the VSANs that are up and running are 323. And the ones that are allowed are VSAN 1, which is the default VSAN, and VSAN 323. I can also see that VSAN 44 is actually isolated because most likely that VSAN only exists on the switch on the left and it doesn't exist on the switch on the right, so it cannot come up on that trunk link. Inter-VSAN routing is just like inter-VLAN routing. It enables devices in different VSANs to communicate. It also allows you to pick and choose which devices can talk to each other so you can control the traffic flow between the selective devices. This allows you to share resources such as tape libraries. Finally, we're going to talk about zoning in the next lesson, but VSANs and zoning are very complementary to each other. First, you assign physical ports to a virtual storage area network, and then you configure the security or the zone per VSAN. VSANs actually divide the physical infrastructure, and zones provide added security and allow sharing of device ports. You can actually see traffic statistics per VSAN, and VSANs only change when you add or remove ports to a VSAN. And zones can change frequently. For instance, I may need to add a new host to be backed up by my tape library. Ports can be added and removed non-disruptively to VSANs, but changes to zones can sometimes have an effect on the network. Please join me for the next lesson, Understanding Zoning.